Are you even successful? What does success mean to you? And how do you even know if you're achieving it? That's what we're talking about today. Measuring your success right here, right now on Air Brands.
You are now tuned in to the On Air Brands podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the On Air Brands show. I am Todd Giannattasio along with my co-host Amber Fuhriman. Amber, what is going on today?
What's up, man? I was just smiling while you were doing the intro. You're talking my language. I'm so excited for today's episode.
The success architect, as she is known.
Yes.
Did you get a new pair of headphones, by the way?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
These are
no?
just massive and ugly and
Yeah.
gross. Like, I feel like when it comes to podcasting, we decided to have conversations about what the most ridiculous equipment was and how we could try to make it look cool.
But that's like the inside baseball, for all the people who geek on it. Then you get to know. And I was chatting with Rob right before you came on in the pre-show. Rob is our producer, asking him what mic he had over there, and he uses the same microphone that Michael Jackson used to record Thriller.
What?
So I thought that was pretty awesome.
Now I'm kind of jealous. Now I need
Yeah.
a new mic.
I know. Well, aren't you in the market for a new mic?
I am. I'm looking for something that will help make me sound more professional and successmal.
Yeah, all right. So we'll hire a voiceover actress for that, and then we'll
Yeah.
be good. Oh,
Thanks. I mean, that'd be par for the course. So
all right. So what are we talking about today here?
we are talking about my favorite topic on the face of the planet, hands down, and that's defining success for yourself. We're going to be talking about it in the business and podcasting world. Take this into every single situation that you're in. I talk often on my podcast about what success means to you. It's actually what the entire podcast is about. I ask every single guest,
Where
what
can the people get
podcast
that
means.
if they want to hop over and subscribe to that?
Morethancorporate.com.
There we go. All
is the best place to find it. So I believe you have success in moments, in days, and then this overreaching idea of success. And we're going to talk about how to break that all down today.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So, I think, of course, like it seems generally common sense to be like, okay, well, I want to be successful, but really, like, why is it important to understand how to measure your success?
I think that this analogy is overused, and I'm still going to use it because it's perfect. And that's like the climbing the mountain, right? Like you're climbing a mountain one step at a time, and then you get to the top of this mountain and you're like, sweet, this view's great, but I want to be over there, right? Like this isn't the mountain I wanted to climb. It's really interesting because scientifically, we can get addicted to accomplishments.
Mhm.
There's this endorphin release that happens when we accomplish something and meet our goals. And too many times we get that endorphin release and we confuse it with success when really it's that quick high from actually doing something. Like that moment was a success because you accomplished something, you successfully completed that. But are you moving in a direction you actually want your life to go? And I feel like this is the issue with podcasting, with business, with people in, just their everyday life is eventually you wake up and you're like, this isn't what I wanted to build. And then you got to figure out how to rebuild it.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely happened to me 5 years into 5-ish, maybe more. I woke up one day and was, I built a job around myself that I didn't set out to do. If that was my intention, I did a great job, but it wasn't my intention. Right. And I actually, even the same thing at the end of 2019, was doing like a lot of, my just annual self-reflection stuff, planning, blah, blah, blah. And I said, man, you know what? 29. And this is also the importance of knowing where you want to go and then reflecting on it to see where you're at. Because if I didn't know where I wanted to go, or I didn't take the time to reflect, I wouldn't have changed directions to get back on track. But what happened was I basically said like, man, 2019, now this is pre-COVID, obviously. I said 2019 was a pretty good ride down to Florida. The problem is I was planning to go to California, right? And so
and they're not the same.
They're not the same, right?
Not even close.
Yeah, different directions.
They both have water.
Right. And so it's like, man, I wasn't turning off the track for the whole year because like, oh, this is is fine. This is good. This is things are okay. I'm relatively happy, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, this wasn't where I was going. Right. Like I was like, oh shoot, time to make a turn here. And,
Yeah.
but that only came because I had a clear idea of where I wanted to go, and I took the time, and now I take that time quarterly now, and in some extent monthly, weekly, daily, but taking the time to review, like, am I on the right track here? So I think that's really the importance of knowing, like, how you define your own success, picking a goal, having a clear vision, having a destination that you're working towards, so that you can continuously check in and say, like, okay, am I on the right track to get there? Is that still where I want to go, or do we want to change the destination? Is this path not the path I thought it was going to feel like? Do I need to change those things? And so I think having a clear definition for success for yourself really dictates everything that you do, how you behave, your environment that you choose, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and whether you're ultimately satisfied with what you've
Mhm.
accomplished, right?
Mhm.
Like, I remember having friends, I'm in law school before I hit this moment of what life am I building? And one of my friends tells me that they're going to sell everything they own, live in a van, and go move to Australia. And to me, that was completely absurd. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're in
A little
school
too
for
inspired by
this,
Chris
like,
Farley's SNL character there.
exactly, right? Like, to them though, and we're 8 years later, she's still there,
Wow.
and
Still in the
happy and
van, or did she
married
get a
and
house
loved.
at least?
No, they're still just traveling the
Wow.
world,
All right.
traveling Australia. Like,
Yeah.
she works on a cruise ship and they have this nomad life, and that's success to them.
Yep.
And then also acknowledging that through your life and your business, that definition of success isn't going to stay the same.
Mhm.
And you mentioned giving yourself that permission to pivot. This is the same thing, like that constant evaluation. There's this amazing book, The Subtle Art, if you know it, by Mark Manson. We just won't finish that sentence on this podcast because
Yep.
it's not mine. And he talks about the idea of failure. And he talks about the fact that, too many times when people shift and pivot, they consider it a failure because they didn't accomplish your goal. But if you decided your goal wasn't what you actually wanted, then is it a failure or is it a success to make that pivot and that adjustment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So understanding what you want, particularly out of your business, is incredibly important. When we're talking about creating content, designing a marketing plan, it's going to be completely different for somebody whose idea of success is, 7 figures in a year, as opposed to somebody whose idea of success is doing 10 speaking engagements and finding,
Mhm.
whatever that is. So
Mhm.
your plan of attack is going to be different.
Yeah. And I think making sure that, one, you're working towards your outcome, and that the plan of attack is on point. And before we get too far off, talking about the pivoting is success and learning. I was listening to the book Blue Fishing by our friend Steve Sims last
Yes.
weekend, and I forget exactly the whole spiel, but basically, if you're doing something, it's and you don't get where you thought you wanted to go, it's not failure, it's discovery.
Yeah.
Right. And so in doing so, you discover, okay, these are the other things. And it's also why, when we also always discuss and coach and work on like a lean marketing, lean launch strategies, where we really sell things before we build them, and then we build them along with people. And so we do that because if I were to spend 6 months and $18,000 on video production and design and all this kind of stuff to create some kind of like super high end online program, and then take it to market, and then it flopped, well, I just spent 6 months and $20,000 on something that's not worth anything, right? But
Yeah.
if we take the message to market and we start getting traction, we can craft it along with our audience. Also, that's the power of having an audience, which was last week's episode here. But now we're discovering along the way before we spend $20,000, right? So I'm able to test and spend $1,000 on advertising and see what happens. And a lot of people might think like, oh, well, that's a failure. You spent $1,000 on ads for nothing. It's like, no. I spent $1,000 on ads, and I didn't spend 6 months and $20,000 developing a product that nobody wanted. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
that 1 month and $1,000 saved me 5 months and $20,000.
Yeah, it's definitely about perspective and the way that it's looked at. And this just goes back to one of the prior conversations that we had about, like, what you want really doesn't matter. Like, you can think your product is
Right.
great and cool. It's what your clients want that matter. And And so we have to take that in. So this is where this conversation gets so powerful, because yes, this is what your definition of success is. But then the moment that you're able to start identifying what your client's definition of success is, you can start building the products, services, and solutions that help them achieve that. And then you've just become an actual service provider instead of just an order taker, like we were talking a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, totally. And so now when it comes to podcasts and content production, whether it's a video show like this, audio strictly, whatever kind of content you're putting out, there are milestones along the customer journey, which I've talked about several times, but, just quickly, there are the awareness stage. Like, are you trying to get in front of new people? The engagement stage, are you trying to keep engaged and keep a conversation going and move people forward on that journey? And then there's the permission stage. Are you trying to get people opted in and generate inbound leads and have permission to build the relationship further? Are you looking to convert people from eyeballs into paying customers? And then once they buy from you, now you have to excite them and transform them and deliver the goods that they paid you for, right? So are you measuring the success on their success? And then it's, how do we ascend these customers? So maybe it's for your existing clients and customers. How do we now get them to the next level where they're either spending more or more frequently, buying more stuff from you, delivering more, so you can deliver more value? Or are you looking to measure your success based on advocacy and promotion? Like, are we getting our customer base to promote our brand, right? And I think podcasting and content creation is all there. It can be successful in each one of those things, but it's very hard for it to be successful in more than a couple, right? And each one of those takes its own strategy and action plan beyond just creating a show.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that it can be successful in multiple different areas. The approach is different for each one, though.
Right.
And so you either have, like, you'll see podcasters that have multiple shows because they're serving different areas of that customer journey. You'll see podcasts that shift their direction because they've done the lead gen and now they're in the fulfillment. They have the attention. They're doing all of that now. It is impossible in any area of your business to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And so you get to decide, what is the purpose of my podcast now? Who am I speaking to? What part of the customer journey are they in? And what content do I need to create in order to make that happen, so that I can reach my success in a business?
Yeah. And so, it starts with defining, clearly defining your own success so that you can be intentional about what you're doing. So number one, are you creating content? Are you producing a show? By the way, if you want to start having your own show, whether podcast, audio, video like this one, make sure you hit up onairbrands.com, because that's what we do and help clients with. But if you want to build your audience, if you want to reach more people and create more awareness, then that's where you're going to focus on your show, right? You're going to want to go and do keyword research so that you're creating topics that are optimized for what people are searching for so that you can show up on search. You're going to want to embed your shows into blog posts that are optimized for those keywords. You're going to want to run paid traffic to your episodes so that you're getting new people there, right? Like, if you want to increase awareness and reach new people, those are the kind of things that you need to be doing. But if you're in the engagement stage, where you have an audience, you have people that you just want to continue a conversation and deepen your relationship. Well, now it's like, all right, well, you already have your email list or your social media following. So now you could just publish your episode right onto YouTube or Anchor or wherever, and you don't have to do anything else. And then you just maybe shoot out an email or post it on social like, hey, new episode's up. Because now you're just using that to engage the people that are already paying attention.
Yeah. And I think also, like, this is where you can structure certain episodes to accomplish different areas of this within the same podcast, right?
Absolutely.
So if your purpose is for awareness, you might be looking to get some high profile guests in your field that can come in and talk about something that can share out to their network, that can give awareness to you and your brand. If you're looking for engagement, you might take a listener of your show and ask them what they thought and engage with them on social media, or bring a listener on, or a customer journey onto your podcast to talk about engagement. There's so many different ways that you can do this based upon what your purpose is with it once you understand it.
Yeah. And so, if typically on the surface, it seems like, oh, I'm going to produce a show, I'm going to have videos, I'm going to have an audio podcast, and I want to build a large audience, right? Like, that's the initial thought process. But Where there can also be more magic is in the relationship that you have with guests, which is something we always talk about. And so if you are looking to either get meetings with potential clients or strategic partners, having a podcast interview style to talk to them about an adjacent topic to what you provide is a great way to get a response from your outreach and to move things along so that you can create those relationships. And then you do that from a value first perspective, right? Which is something I always talk about.
Yeah. And then also, I think that it becomes really amazing to mix and match, right? Because people like to see that change. We talked about it in the newsletter episode of, mixing it up so they're not seeing the same thing every single time. I was talking to somebody about my podcast being extremely conversational. I don't have questions that I ask on a regular basis, except one, which is, what does success mean to you, on every single podcast? Because I feel like on those questions, like, exactly what you're going to hear, and your audience tunes out when it's exactly the same question every single time. So switching around, playing around with the format is important. I think that if you haven't caught on yet, as you're listening to this, what should be screaming at you is intentionality. Like every single episode you post has to have an intention behind it for that episode, and then also a long-term game plan.
Yeah, exactly. So if your intention is to build a large audience, then you need to take action towards that. If your intention is that you want to get clients and sales, and you can do so through bringing on guests to open relationships with those potential clients, then honestly, you don't need to have any audience. You could have 10 listeners, and you're going to be, your podcast will be a success because it's creating the relationships that turn into clients or strategic partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this is where it also gets extremely important to understand this, because I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you are somebody whose goal is to have a ton of following, and you start your podcast and you think, if I just start talking, people will listen, you are going to be extremely disappointed.
Yes.
And so this idea that if you produce content, people will care, it's
or even see it.
mistaken.
Maybe they would care if they saw it, but podcasting is not
who
the field of
knows
dreams.
whether they see it. So, I mean, the reality is understanding, like, if you're, whatever your definition of success is, what are the micro definitions that need to happen to get you up to that macro definition? And what are the stepping stones to get you there? I remember when I started my podcast, the best advice I was given was, regardless of your goals, don't look at numbers for the first 6 months, because you will be depressed how many people don't listen to you. Like, you're putting all this work in, and you look at it and you're like, well, 4 people, right? Which is great. That's 4 people who didn't know you before, or mom. And understanding, your definition of success will change. What is it now? What is it going to be later on? And how do we grow to that macro definition?
And I think if you look at it, to take short-term and long-term success into account, when I launched a show for my tech company a couple years ago, I couldn't even tell you how many people watched it. I probably had a rough idea at the time, but at this point, I have no idea. I mean, it was in the dozens. It wasn't a large audience. But I did, like, if I did 30 episodes, I either created or deepened 30 relationships with each of those guests that I had. And some of them turned into great strategic partners. Some of them have become clients. And so even though even though the numbers, if you look at the YouTube views, were, in the dozens or hundreds, low hundreds, it's like, okay, that doesn't seem like it got a lot of traction. It's like, but out of those 30 episodes, we got one deal that was $150,000. And so, was that worth it? Was that successful? Like, you have to be able to know what you're going after and how to define success.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, this is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made when I started my podcast, is that I didn't truly understand the power of metrics and tracking. And, when we're talking about, measuring that definition of success, like, we are so good at convincing ourselves that we're doing better than we think we are. And then when we really are tired, we're great at convincing ourselves that what we're doing isn't working, right? When we're ready to sabotage ourselves. So having those metrics, if somebody was to ask you how many, and this is, just straight up vulnerability. If somebody was to ask Todd, how many people do you convert from your podcast? He would have numbers in like 2 minutes. And I would be like, I need Todd in my life.
I
So,
probably
I
couldn't
mean,
even tell you, but to be honest, I couldn't even tell you because, well, one, when it comes to measuring podcast success, like you don't know how many subscribers are in Apple or Spotify that hit subscribe, right? Like we don't have those kind of numbers. And we don't know, even if it did, you know, you don't know who they are specifically. I know who's on my email list. I can look at email addresses and see that, and I can see who's open and all that kind of stuff. But it's you know, when it comes to especially marketing success and digital marketing, there's a constant conversation around attribution and like, oh, well, they searched, you know, they found us on Google. It's like, dude, listen to this journey that we measured. And for another client we're running ads through Facebook. And for those that don't know, Facebook owns like half the internet. So when I say Facebook ads, it's actually not just like when
the
you
half
open
that Amazon doesn't own.
yeah, exactly. Amazon, Google, and Facebook is 90% of the internet if you're running from through ad platforms. And so it's not just Facebook, but we tracked a journey when we were looking through our weekly numbers for a client, and we had two people from an edu address, which we thought was interesting, and they were different they were different .edus, but it turned out what happened was the student worked in the school in like, you know, worked at the school for whatever department, and they said, hey, we need to solve this problem. Go find three, you know, I don't know what the assignment was exact. Go find three options for us, check them out, and then come back and give me your suggestions. So the student, and this could be an employee, right? It doesn't have to just be college. So the employee is this assignment to research. So they go out and they search Google and they click on one of our Google ads and they sign up for a free trial. And they didn't convert at the end into a paid software buyer, right? But they signed up for the free trial. Then a few days later, it must have been the following week because it was in staggered reports. Then the following week, the other person clicks on our Instagram stories ad, which is a Facebook ad for those keeping score, clicks on our Instagram stories ad and signs up for our free case study, and then goes onto the website, signs up for a free trial, and then books a sales demo to buy the software. Now, if we just looked at that one guy, we're like, oh man, Instagram stories is where it's at. That's where we need to really ramp up our spend. But that's not the true story of what happened. And so trying to track attribution, it's like, okay, one person was asked to research it. They Googled it, signed up, suggested it to someone else. The reason that guy saw the Instagram ad was because he was retargeted. So he got the suggestion, look at this software. He went to the website to look at it and then got retargeted in Instagram stories, which, like, who would have thought that a 50-something-year-old professor is going to be signing up for B2B software through an Instagram story, right? Like, and there's
you
just
broke all the stereotypes there.
Yeah. And so there's just so many touch points, and that's the importance and power of having a show where you're producing content regularly, where you could just continuously get in front of people and be in multiple places at once, because it's not just one thing. And that's why, back to your original question, like, I don't know how many people I've converted because of the zero because they Googled and found an episode, listened to it, and then called me up and bought me. But how many people that are following me on social media and seeing me share the episodes or on my email list, and over the course of 6 months have caught a snippet of the show here, a snippet of the show there, and then I run a flash sale and send out a link, and they spend $600 on one of our courses. So, like, I can't directly attribute that, but it definitely plays a role.
Yeah. And if anybody else is sitting here listening to Todd thinking, my God, this is exhausting. This is why you need marketers in your life, because they enjoy this stuff.
Yes.
I get exhausted by it. The other side of this, though, is I recently got this amazing message from somebody who's been in my life for the last 4 or 5 years. And she's in my Facebook community that's tied to my podcast. She's been there from the very beginning. She's been incredibly supportive of me. She comments on my posts, all of this stuff. I get a message from her the other day, and she says, so I have this shameless announcement to make, that I listened to the first episode of your podcast today. And I just wanted to let you know, man, it's really good. And you're making me think. And then, like, the next couple of days, I got different messages. I liked this episode. I liked this episode.
And this is at how many episodes did you have?
200.
Yeah.
She had been there since episode number 1. I mean, we ran Tough Mudders together 4 years ago. So I knew her before I started my podcast. She jumped in to support me. So people don't always know that they need what you're offering, whether it be in your podcast, your service, your solution, whatever that is. And the value of having constant contact with them from multiple different ways. I mean, she's in my Facebook group. We have a couple of other Tough Mudder groups that we're in. She listens to my podcast. Like, it's not just one method. You have to piecemeal this together in a way that makes sense for your definition of success and your clients.
Yeah. And that's also why I think having a show is the best way for businesses, solopreneurs, big brands, whatever, to do this, because if it does sound exhausting to you, the great news is you only have to show up for an hour a week, and then you can hand off the rest of your whole marketing because you've already put your expertise into this digital format of a show that now your team or your marketing agency can take your 30 to 60 minutes and take all your expertise and write it out into social posts and cut it up into video posts and all those kind of things. So like, if it does sound exhausting, I personally think having a show is the easiest way to, create leverage for your own marketing.
Agreed.
So you only have to spend an hour on that every week, and then you can hand off the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we had you mentioned Steve Sims earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
We had the amazing opportunity to sit down and listen to him talk. And no matter how many times I hear him talk, he always says something else that just grabs me. And the thing that he said the last time we listened was that the difference between you and the most successful people that you follow is that they value their time more than you do. And when we start looking at, people saying, like, if you edit your own podcast, if you do your own marketing, if you do all of this stuff, you don't have time to run your business.
Correct.
On top of that, if you're using your podcast for business development and your definition of success with your content creation is conversion of clients, then you need to be able to have a long-term game plan that's bigger than what you can see in and of itself. And you need to have a team of people together that can help say, okay, we're going to edit content like this. We're going to release it like this. We're going to do this type of follow-up. One person cannot do all of that, not even in a marketing agency. So it becomes based upon your definition of success. What strategies do you need in place? It's a long-term game. We were talking about books earlier today, so these are all in my head. And Winning with Tim Grover, he has my favorite line in there right now is people say it's a marathon, not a sprint, and they're wrong. It's a sprint with no finish line.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's the way this game is played. It's a sprint with no finish line, and you need people on your side to make it happen.
Yeah. Another good book. I wouldn't call it great, but is Simon Sinek's, I think it's his most recent one, in The Infinite Game. And it talks about that. It's, are you playing a game that is finite and has an end, and then you can play that game one way? Or are you playing a game that lasts forever, and then you need to think about it completely different? Yeah,
absolutely. So moral of the story is, figure out what success means to you. Figure out what it means when you're starting your content, when you're creating your content. Figure out what it means to your clients. I personally believe that the only way to achieve success in business and life and whatever you are doing is to understand the definition of success for everybody that's involved. Think about a leadership situation. What if you're leading a team? What does success mean to your team, and how do you provide them the things that allow them to feel valued, right? Yeah. So this question, what does success mean to me, will change your life in every area, but especially your content creation and where you're spending your time.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you sit down and define what your goals are and have a clear vision for where you're trying to get to. Then you can reverse engineer where your action plan should be and give you the quickest path. And then constantly just check in with yourself. Is that still the destination I want to get to? And is this still the right path to get me there? And that will help you get you to the success that we are all looking for. Those chemicals released. The word is escaping me. The chemicals you were talking about at the top of Mount Everest?
The endorphins.
The endorphins. Yes. So we all want to release our endorphins. And so get that clear vision, get an action plan, and constantly check in on it so that you don't wake up in 1, 3, 5, 10 years and you're like, man, I can't believe I've been on this hamster wheel the whole time. I wasn't moving myself towards anything, or worse, moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And, really quickly on that point, if you are on that hamster wheel, because we've all been there before, know that you can reformat those pictures, right? like, wow, this isn't a, I got the hiccups all of a sudden at the last minute. This isn't a puzzle that only gets put together one way.
Right.
This is a puzzle that you get to take all the skills, resources, and knowledge that you've learned while you've been on that hamster wheel, and you get to readjust them to fit the new direction that you want to go in. You have to, however, have the awareness to say, this isn't the direction that I want this ball to be moving. Who do I need to connect with? What resources do I need? And how do I give myself permission to rearrange my puzzle pieces?
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. If you guys don't have clear goals and success architected yet for yourself, your life, your business, or your team, make sure you go to morethancorporate.com and subscribe to Amber's other podcast where she breaks this down every single week, twice a week, I think, right? Solo and
twice
interviews?
a week, one solo, one interview. So I do it once a week, and my amazing guests do it the rest of the week, and I just ride on their coattails.
And if you are now convinced that having a show is the way that you want to start taking action and grow your business, make sure you go to onairbrands.com/show. You can get all the other episodes, or onairbrands.com, and contact the team there to talk about how you can launch a show for your business. And with that said, we will catch you guys on the next episode.